If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths and sometimes heights to ensure the power is always flowing, which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
A magic beyond anything you could ever imagine.
You are now listening to the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Locking down the middle of the day.
You really think that's the best idea?
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
It's quite a piece of work.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. It means we're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Beef. Fired up to be here. Glad you are with us. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Plenty to do here before 3 o'clock. In the next 15 minutes, we'll talk about LSU and Florida setting a kickoff time for the fall. Joe Healy in his normal slot at 1:30. We'll preview all the SEC regionals. There are a lot of them. 13 teams qualified for the field. I've got 3 key players for LSU this weekend in the Baton Rouge Regional. Get into some of that. Chris Blair will join us. He'll be on the call all weekend long from the box. I got some Saints salary cap to talk about as well. So plenty to do. Let's get into it the same way we do every single day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
All right, let's rock and roll. I want to talk a little bit about regionals because we have so much rich history here in Baton Rouge at LSU when it comes to big-time postseason baseball. And when you've got moments like 2 walk-off hits to win national championships, like Tommy White hitting a walk-off to send LSU to the national title, like Ty Floyd in a championship series striking out 17, 18 Florida hitters, when you've got Nola and Gray in a super regional, and you've got so much history, I think sometimes some things can get forgotten. And sometimes it's helpful to go back and recall some of these. I did a segment similar to this 2 years ago, and there's a reasonable chance that some of you will recall that segment. But a lot of you won't. And I think it's important to kind of put some things into perspective, because if you're like myself, and many of you are, on Memorial Day, you lock into that selection show and bang, the bracket comes out and you look at it. And more often than not, that Baton Rouge regional bracket is going to feature Southeastern Louisiana. It's going to feature Southern Miss. It's going to feature Utah Valley. It's going to feature ULM. Some kind of mid-tier team like Baylor may show up, or you could have a Central Florida. Like there are teams that you would look at on that screen that day and go, well, that's a pretty good draw for LSU. They're better than all those teams. And generally speaking, LSU's better than most teams in college baseball. And in a given year when they're hosting a regional, when they're a national seed, they're better than the teams that come to them in a regional. And they're better than the teams that have come to their regional this year. But that does not mean that winning a regional is easy, because it's not. And there is way too much proof suggesting that it is not easy. And I started going back and looking at the regionals at the new box. I think if you go back to 1994 and you start talking about the 6-team regionals at the box where guys were pitching 3 different times over the weekend and scores were going 21-14, like, you're not really comparing apples to apples. But if you go back from 2009 to today, yes, they've changed the bats. Yes, LSU's had 2 different coaches. Yes, aces have come and gone, but it's the same format, and LSU has carried essentially the same status in college baseball throughout that time as one of the premier programs. And I bet it would be difficult for most of LSU fans to go back year over year and think about the tough times LSU did have in a regional. Because look, LSU wins most of the regionals. They've won 24 of 27 regionals in Baton Rouge. 24 of 27. That is a remarkably high winning percentage. So I think most of us as LSU fans just look at that and go, well, they're going to win the regional. Win it every time. But how do they get to winning that regional? And that's what I went into today. I wrote a column up at louisianasports.net, and I'll visit some of the things that I dug up. I remember almost all this, but I will admit there was some of it that I wasn't completely familiar with looking back. Go back to 2009. It's a national championship team. When I say 2009 Tigers, you think about Omaha. You think about the moments there, whether it's DJ LeMahieu's huge double against Texas or the big hit Sean Ochinko got after being moved up in the lineup. You think about Lewis Coleman, Anthony Nada. You think about Ryan Schimpf and Blake Dean. You think about all those things in Omaha. Do you remember that regional at all? Because in the first game of that regional, LSU played Southern. And Southern threw Chase Richard out there, and he was left-handed, and he was from the area, and he was throwing a 65-mile-an-hour breaking ball, and LSU went to the 7th inning trailing Southern 2-1. Now, they scored 7 runs in the 7th inning, but they were trailing on Friday in the 7th against Southern with the national championship team. And then the next day, LSU played Baylor. And Anthony Renato threw one of the most courageous games I've ever watched. I was interning at Channel 9 at the time, and I watched that game with the media. He threw 9 innings and gave up 1 earned run. Gave up a second run. It was unearned, but 1 earned run in 9 innings. And it was not enough to get LSU to the finish line. That game went extras with Baylor, and it took an Austin Nola single in the 10th to put LSU in front and win that game 3-2. Really tough first 2 games for the regional for LSU with a national championship team. I fast forward to 2013. That team is one of the best in LSU history. I won't hear any other explanation for it. Mason Katz, Rafe Rhymes, Alex Bregman. You had Mark Laird. You had a really Jacoby Jones on that team. It was a really good team. And they played the opener of that regional against Jackson State. And Cody Glenn wasn't great. And then they hit a pop-up, Jackson State did, to left field. And Rafe Rhymes, the nation's leading hitter, and Alex Bregman, the Brooks Wallace Award winner, collided in left field, and Bregman stayed down. He left the game and went to the hospital. And you won, but you had to use your closer, Chris Cotton, and your best player left to go to the hospital. And that wasn't a great Friday. And Saturday was even worse because you played Sam Houston State. You had Aaron Nola, 10-0, National Pitcher of the Year, Sam Houston State. LSU makes 3 errors in the first inning of that game and is down 5-0. And Aaron Nola threw 43 pitches in the first inning. And I'm sitting in the press box going, you have got to be kidding me. I have watched this kid pitch all year. No one's touched him. And now Christian Ibarra can't field a ground ball. And you got down 5-0. You clawed your way back. And Nola, in maybe his most Herculean outing of his career, maybe even better than the one the week after that against Jonathan Gray where he threw a complete game shutout, after throwing 43 pitches in a 5-run first, got through 7 innings and never allowed another run. And LSU won. But, I mean, that's panic time. Your ace is on the ropes, and it's Sam Houston, and LSU won the game, won the regional. 2014, they lost the regional. Houston came back and beat them twice. In 2015, I did not recall all of this. So I was there when Alex Lang, in 2015, that was his freshman year, the team that went to Omaha and went 1-2. In the regional, he pitched against UNC Wilmington in the Saturday night game. And rain came and it got pushed. They started at 10 o'clock at night. And he threw a complete game shutout that ended well after midnight. I remember that vividly. I did not remember that Wilmington came back and played LSU Sunday night in the championship game, and Jared Poche had to throw 8 2/3 shutout after Lang had gone complete game shutout to win that game 2-0. They had to go to the bullpen for one more out. But Lang and Poche combined for 17 2/3 innings, and it was barely enough to beat UNC Wilmington at the box for an Omaha team. Fast forward 2 years. 2017, one of the best teams in school history, came 2 games short of a national championship. I remember this. I was in the stadium that night not working. Southeastern, the 3 seed, got into the marble game on Saturday night against Alex Lang. Alex Lang is a junior, future first-round pick. Really an unhittable force in the postseason. It only lost one game, and that was to Coastal the year prior. And Southeastern hangs a 5 spot on Lang in the first 2 innings of the marble game to lead 5-4. It was worse than any outing he had in SEC play that year. 5 spot. I mean, that's one of those deals where you look at those midweek games on Tuesdays when Southeastern or Nichols or Northwestern State or somebody hangs in, and you're like, yeah, but if you had to face our Friday guy, it'd be a disaster for you. 5 runs in the second for Southeastern. And then Lang settled in, and the bats kind of came to life, and LSU was able to come back and win that game. But you don't really remember things like that. And so I'm telling you this in front of this regional, like, it just never goes smooth. 2 years ago, that team was a juggernaut. It was a juggernaut. And you throw Paul Skeens out there in the first game, and that was easy. He mowed them down, complete game shutout. You hit the ball against Tulane, easy win. But then you played Oregon State, and you sent Ty Floyd out there, and Ty Floyd got hit. He gave up 3 runs early. You were down 3-0. And then the rain came, and you were down 3-0. So you can't use Ty Floyd anymore. So now you got to go to Thatcher Hurd. And Thatcher Hurd struck a ton of guys out, but he did get hit a little bit. And at the 7th inning of the marble game of that regional, with Paul Skeens on the bench, and Ty Floyd on the bench, and Thatcher Hurd on the bench, Oregon State scored 2 runs, and it was 5-5 against the eventual national champs. But you're right there. You're one swing in those last 6 outs from having to come back and win 3 games in a row without those 3 pitchers. The point of this exercise is not at all to scare you, an LSU fan. Like, that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm not intimidated in any way, shape, or form. I'm not terrified in any way, shape, or form about this regional. What I am anticipating is starting 25 hours from right now, there to be some spots over the course of the next 3 to 4 days where it gets dicey, because it just does every single year. There's only one regional I can really look back to in my time in Baton Rouge, which is after the 90s. And I can't speak to all those 6-team regionals, and I'm not going to go back and pull every box score from every one of them. But in 2008, that team was on a ridiculous heater, and UNO and Southern Miss came in here, and LSU just walked through the regional. They started Jordan Brown on Friday, Jared Bradford on Saturday, Blake Martin on Sunday, and they just smoked them. It was that team. They ended up going to Omaha. They got beat the next week against Irvine in the first game, but they won the last 2. Obviously, it was the last weekend of the box. They smoked them in that regional. But that just doesn't happen very often. So I'm not sitting here anticipating Anderson tomorrow for 7 shutouts. You win it 8-0. And then you send Ianson out there, and he strikes out 15 and 6 2/3, and you hit 2 homers, and you win that game 8-1. And then somebody comes back, and you pummel some bullpen 13-3, and you move on. Like, that'd be great. I would love it. It would be the happiest I could be. But I just think that history shows that's probably not going to happen. I'd even mention in the course of this segment the ridiculous 2016 regional where you had Jared Poche come back after pitching on Friday on Monday and retire 16 straight Rice Owls, and you were still losing in the 7th inning when Greg Dykman hit a big 2-run homer to put you in front. But Poche had started on Friday, came back and finished the game on Monday. That was anything but easy. So that's just kind of the way I'm psyching myself up mentally to go into this regional with, like, all right, there are going to be some moments where it gets dicey. You just got to go make the plays, make the pitches. And LSU's got plenty enough hitters to go out there and make. They don't have to rely on Jared Jones to do everything. They don't have to rely on Ianson and Anderson to do everything. They got to carry their weight. Jared Jones needs to hit a home run or 2. Ianson and Anderson need to go 13 total innings. But you're going to have some ancillary guys step up and make plays. I'll talk at the end of the hour about the guys that I want to see step up as big keys this weekend. And just a spoiler, it's not Jared Jones, it's not Anderson, it's not Ianson. Those guys, to me, are stalwarts. They're guys that you need to play well, but you have to expect that they will. There are some ancillary pieces that I think are going to be big this weekend, and I'll talk about those later on. But the big key to this deal is these things are weird. There's 4 teams here. You're playing a lot of baseball. You're testing pitching staffs. There are rain delays sometimes. The box gets real offensive. Somebody hits a 3-run homer. Things get dicey. Let's just lock in, enjoy it. And generally speaking, as I mentioned, LSU's won 24 of 27 regionals at the box. Let's see if we can make it 25 out of 28 over the next 3 days, potentially 4. That's our opening drive here, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge. We'll come back. Let's talk a little bit about game times. LSU and Florida's game time is set. We'll do that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Thursday show is always brought to you by Sagrera Farms, premium beef. Been telling you about them for a couple of months. Man, what an incredible hidden gem here just north of Baton Rouge. Sean Sagrera and the folks over at Sagrera Farms, quite literally, some of the finest beef in the world. And if you're looking for an alternative way to purchase your beef to have at home, whether it's your steaks, your ribeyes, your fillets, your strips, blank steaks, whether it's your ground beef that you use a couple times a week, Sagrera Farms can help you with it. They sell sides and whole cows, and in terms of the marbling, in terms of the fat content, intermuscular fat, it is some of the finest beef in the world. The IMF scores a 9 is prime. You're looking for something choice, select, you're looking at 3, 4, 5, 6. Prime is 9. There are cows walking around Sagrera Farms that we know right now, based on doing the ultrasound, are 12, 14, 16 on that scale. It is some of the best beef you've ever tasted. If you're a steak lover, and sometimes you get a great steak, sometimes it's just not very good, I can promise you, you will get great steaks every time at Sagrera Farms. You can stuff your freezer for the next 6 months and not worry about purchasing beef again. If you go contact my guy, Sean Sagrera, head up to Sagrera Farms, look at the product, and then bring it back to your home, put it in the freezer, and have it right there. I give you Sean's phone number each and every week, and I want you to call him, and I want you to tell him, hey, heard about Sagrera Farms on the Hunt Palmer Show. I'm interested in those steaks, that beef. Let's see what we can do. Sean will be more than happy to help you out. His cell is 719-1723. 719-1723. It's only prime. Top 1% beef in the world. Every cow is a 3-year process. It's aged 35, 40 days, raised on grass, finished on grain. They're serious about their stuff at Sagrera Farms, and you can tell when you go up there and do your shopping. All right, we got a couple of game times for LSU football coming up this fall. We already know that LSU opens up at Clemson, going to be under the lights in Clemson, South Carolina, going to be a monster football game for those two programs. And then LSU's going to come home, and they're going to play Louisiana Tech. And that game's going to be at 6:30, and my pregame show is going to start at 4:30, and I'm going to be sitting on that set, and I'm going to be cooking. And it's going to be ridiculously hot, and that's okay. That's all I know about the first game, whether it's Grambling or Southern or Louisiana Tech. It's just a scorcher. It's the one game a year I wear shorts to work on football season. But nobody cares what time LSU and Tech kick off. The home opener will, in fact, be at 6:30 if that's something you're interested in. What I'm more interested in is Week 3, because LSU plays Florida in Week 3. And that game is going to be massive for both teams. If LSU were playing Florida back in the same time slot that they were this past year, it would be reasonable to suggest that Florida could be in some significant turmoil at that time, like it was reasonable to suggest that last year. Billy Napier's kind of hanging on there. I don't know if he's got the full confidence of his fan base, and we'll see about his football team. But they're going to be fired up and ready to go in Week 3. And LSU needs to be ready to go in Week 3. And I can promise you this, Tiger fans are going to be ready to go in Week 3 for a 6:30 Saturday night in Death Valley against Florida. And it's just going to be massive. DJ Lagway, Garrett Nussmeier, Billy Napier and Brian Kelly were in the same hiring cycle both have some expectation on them to take a step forward. For LSU, that step is, hey, we're competing at the national level. We're competing for the SEC championship. We're competing for a college football playoff spot. We're competing for a national championship. That's the step LSU has to take. Brian Kelly's not shying away from that. He's going to Destin and SEC meetings and saying, hey, this is the best team we've had. Billy Napier, meanwhile, you got to stop going 6-7 wins. You got to win 8 or 9. You got to win 10. You got your quarterback. He's here. Paid him. Finished the year strong last year. It's time to go. And that's what you're going to see in week 3 between these two teams that have been rivals in the SEC since the early 90s. And somehow, some way, LSU actually has controlled this thing of late. You realize that Florida snapped a 4-game LSU win streak. Last year, LSU had won 4 games in a row against the Gators. The last time Florida came to Tiger Stadium and won a football game was when Darius Geis went the wrong way in 2016. That game was, of course, controversially moved because of Hurricane Matthew. This is one of the great rivalries in the Southeastern Conference. Some of you demand we keep it. Some don't care as much. I can promise you this, the new morning show that starts here on June 2nd, Flynn and Hester, Monday morning, they care. And this is going to be just huge between these two teams. We don't think about these teams playing in September, this week 3, all that often. We've seen them play some games in late September and certainly October. Not used to it in November like it was last year. But this is coming out of the chute. This is a spot where LSU often played Mississippi State, right? And now that game's not an annual, and LSU won't play Mississippi State this year. Florida jumps in there. And for LSU, man, how much are we going to know about this football team after 3 weeks? You're going to go to Clemson and either announce that you've put 5 straight season opening losses behind you and are ready to be a threat this year as a national title contender, or you tuck your tail between your legs. You say, we're not ready to do that right now. We've lost 6 openers in a row. Now we got to come lick our wounds against Louisiana Tech, and then we got to play Florida. Or, man, you come off that Clemson win, and you play Florida, and you play Louisiana Tech, you win that game, and then Florida comes in for a Saturday night in Death Valley that will be on springs. 2 quarterbacks that are really, really good. And finally, for LSU over the last 5 years, a little revenge angle for the Tigers, who they just got beat by a Florida defense that wasn't very good last year. They kind of put the clamps on LSU, 27-16. Supposed to be a high-flying LSU offense. It certainly wasn't that evening in the Swamp. But this one is going to be huge, and it is going to be at night. I know a lot of away fans or fans of other teams in the league besides LSU kind of cringe that LSU seems to get the nod to play at night more often than not by the league and by the televisions. But that's the case in week 3. And both programs will have a lot on the line that evening, because if LSU starts 1-2, this is going to be a grumpy, grumpy town. If LSU starts 3-0, this is going to be a town with sights on December. And Florida will get Tiger Stadium at full throat in week 3 for a 6:30 kickoff. That one will be on ABC. We got that news earlier today. A lot of SEC kickoff times announced today as the SEC spring meetings are going on over in Destin. I've got a story up on LouisianaSports.net about that right now. You can also check out the SEC schedule over at LouisianaSports.net as well. So as you look at LSU's first 3 weeks, Clemson on the road at night, Louisiana Tech 6:30, Florida 6:30, those 2 at home. All right, let's transition over to baseball. Joe Healy and Mark Etheridge are working frantically over at the D1 Baseball SEC Extra page. The SEC put 13 teams into the field of 64. They'll all start up tomorrow, and we'll talk about a lot of that with Joe Healy when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Means every car that's on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. So go check out the inventory right there online. And the beauty of shopping with Genesis, you never have to set foot on the lot. You can peruse that inventory online, check out the pictures, check out the pricing. If you see something that matches your eye, test drive it. You think, well, then I got to go to the dealership. No, you don't. Just reach out. Have one of their brand ambassadors come to you. They're happy to come to the office. They're happy to come to your home. You get behind the wheel, one of those gorgeous Genesis vehicles, drives incredibly smooth, great features, incredible safety ratings, awesome style, and you think, okay, this is what I got to have. You don't have to go to the dealership then either. E-contracts, digital delivery, you are on your way. We live in kind of a delivery society right now, whether it's dinner on a Friday night or buying a car. Can somebody bring that to me, please? Genesis is happy to bring it to you. Genesis Baton Rouge is online at genesisbatonrouge.com. They're on Airline Highway across from Women's Hospital near Pico. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Palmer Show, Thursday edition, brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Plenty to do here over the next hour and a half. Chris Blair coming up at 2:15. We'll chat with him till LSU gets set for baseball at the box this weekend. I still want to talk about the Saints salary cap as well. And I've got 3 key players for LSU this weekend as they look to try to win the Baton Rouge Regional and advance to the round of 16. Joe Healy and Mark Etheridge doing a lot of work over at SEC Extra, part of the D1 baseball team. Highway to Hoover podcast, always fantastic content as well. I'm sure he's excited, and we're thrilled to have him here for the next few minutes. He joins us on Jim's Firearms Hotline. Joe, thanks for the time. How are you?
Doing well, Hunt. Not a lot of sleep this time of year, but a lot of baseball. So that's pretty cool. I'll always take that trade-off.
Absolutely. I'm fired up for it. Briefly, you were in Hoover. Thoughts on the attendance, the crowds, the energy in this single elimination format? I think we were worried about folks traveling with not much guaranteed baseball. What did it look like?
Yeah, it actually, as you got to the business end of it, it looked like it always does. The last maybe 3 days of it, when things really got serious, when the double bye started playing and team, and fans could really bank on the weekend, it really ticked up. Early in the week, it was maybe, 10% lighter or something like that. I did look at the official figures, and the first 4 days or 3 days or so were lighter than they were last year. Ultimately, we'll need to see a larger data set than that, but my hunch is that the early days will maybe be a touch lighter in terms of attendance. But once you get to the later rounds of this thing, it felt like Hoover always does once we got to the quarters, semis, and finals.
Let's talk about a couple teams that played their way into the hosting discussion and ultimately got hosts in Hoover. Tennessee gets the 14 seed, and Ole Miss played all the way to the championship game. They are now the 10 seed. With the Rebels, what do you like about them, and how comfortable are you with them in Oxford this weekend?
First, what I like is that they're super old in a way that we've gotten used to in recent years, but it's starting to kind of go away, right? Because the COVID stuff has largely washed out. They've still managed to, mostly because of injuries, to remain pretty old. And I was dubious of this team. I think on your air, I've been pretty skeptical of it all. And at this point, I just kind of have to tip my hat and say, hey, this team is better than I thought it was. And things are getting a little better on the mound. Riley Maddox has turned a corner. 5 of his last 6 starts have been really, really good. And I kind of thought he was just a nice 5-inning guy, and he's been more than that. So if Hunter Elliott can be postseason Hunter Elliott, which he was last week in Hoover, if he can continue to be that's a pretty strong 1-2 punch. That being said, I do think that is one of the trickier regionals for a couple of reasons. One is Georgia Tech is a strong 2, obviously. They've got the sentimental thing with Danny Hall retiring. They think they should have hosted, so there's probably a little bit of a chip on their shoulder in that regard. And also, it's a 4 seed that I don't think in Murray State that is capable of really challenging to win this thing, but their offense is really good. So I think Ole Miss is going to have to fire its best bullet, most likely Hunter Elliott, in the opener, so that a potential matchup against Georgia Tech in the 1-0 game, they're going to need to turn probably to Riley Maddox. So that makes it a little more of a challenge that I just feel like they can't afford to get cute in that opener against Murray State.
With Tennessee, I think one of the statistical things you look at is the fact that Cincinnati, the 3 seed in Knoxville, runs a ton, and we know that Marcus Phillips struggles with that a ton. And we also know that Tony Vitello really doesn't alter his plans. He throws his ace in the first round of every round. And so that would obviously be Liam Doyle. How do you think they handle that?
Well, so far, I've not heard anything new today, but earlier in the week, one of the local beat reporters, and I just forget which one it was, in Knoxville sent out that Tony plans on using this rotation as is. Now, again, if something has changed because today's, practice day and what have you, I've not heard that yet, but it kind of seems like they're going to just roll with their typical rotation. Like you said, Tony, for all of everything he does and represents and is kind of different from what we've seen before in SEC coaching, he is kind of a traditionalist when it comes to on-field stuff, and that's one of them. And so they are going to stare in the face of the possibility of having Marcus Phillips on the mound against Cincinnati. And it should be said, the last couple of starts he's been better in terms of holding runners, but also, this is going to be something different. You don't see teams in the SEC really that have the intent to run that Cincinnati does, because that's kind of how Cincinnati has to get it done. They're not the most physical team. They're not the most dangerous offensive team. They've got to take those extra bases. And so I think Tennessee stubbornly, and I don't know that I mean that as a criticism, just for better or worse, they are stubbornly going to stare down one of their biggest weaknesses and just trust that it's going to work out.
Georgia will host in Athens. They've got Duke as the 2 seed, Oklahoma State as the 3. How do you feel about the Dogs' chances to come out of that one?
I feel pretty good about it. Oklahoma State, I think had a few good weeks. I don't know that they're actually really that markedly better than what they have been. I think they just had a few weeks where they started playing a little bit better and snuck in. And boy, Duke's pitching is, they're a little bit of like what Georgia pitching is taken to the conclusion of it, where Georgia is kind of like we're mixing and matching pieces. We have a whole bunch of options, and we don't exactly know what we're going to get on a day-to-day basis. That's Duke times like 100. They only have one pitcher who started double-digit games this season. It's a bunch of dudes who've started 5 or 7 games, and they're willing to do whatever with their pitching staff. Now, what does make me a little bit nervous about this regional, though, is that Duke and Oklahoma State both have power. And so I think there is a scenario where Georgia ends up in some games where, it's used to winning, where they're hitting a bunch of home runs, and Duke and or Oklahoma State they're going to be ready for that party. I don't know if they'll be good enough to really push Georgia, but I think the type of game that's going to be played in Athens is going to be perfectly fine with Duke and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I mean, you said that it might happen. I don't see a scenario where it doesn't happen. I think that's just going to end up how that regional goes, especially as it goes on and some of the frontline guys kind of move off. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. Texas been a little bit vulnerable down the stretch. Do you see somebody in Austin that could clip them between UTSA and Kansas State?
I don't think so, with some caveats. One is, it's easy to say, well, UTSA beat Texas. Okay, midweeks. They deserve credit for that, but and certainly it takes some of the intimidation factor out. But midweeks are just different than weekends. And Kansas State, I think, has the talent to be tricky here. I mean, Arkansas learned that last year, but this K-State team's not as good as that one. They just don't do fundamental things very well, which is something at the major conference level you don't see much of. They're pretty talented. They've got dudes who throw hard and dudes with power and guys who can run, but they just make weird mistakes in the field, and they don't run the bases well, and so they've had a bunch of little things go wrong that's actually made it to where they were closer to the bubble than I think they should have been. I think Texas is a heavy favorite in that regional. I think it's one of the softer ones among the SEC hosted regionals. The only question now is if they're going to fix the wall in the outfield fast enough to get that thing done. I assume they will, but it's going to come down to the wire, I think.
For those that aren't familiar, I just learned about this an hour ago. There was a bad storm that rolled through Austin last night, and the entire batter's eye in center field collapsed with what looks like 30 feet of wall that's just not there anymore. He'll have to deal with at some point over the 24 hours. All right, Vanderbilt got the number 1 overall seed as I moved to the other side of bracket. What has changed with Vanderbilt over the last month?
They're certainly hitting with more power. That is one. I think they've kind of adopted an attitude with some of their guys, like Brody Johnston, for example, that their best lineups are with those guys in the lineup, kind of regardless of some of the shortcomings. So Brody Johnston does not walk, and he strikes out a ton, but his power is something that helps having in the middle of that order. Braden Holcomb is pretty similar, so there's that. And then some other guys have gotten going. Jonathan Vastine is a lot better now than he was in March and early April. R.J. Austin had this horrific slump for much of kind of the middle portion of SEC play. He's playing better, so I think that has been helpful. And then I think on the mound, they've found the right combinations. I think they've hit on something with the Bowker Fennell piggyback situation, moving Austin Nye the freshman into the weekend rotation. I mean, that dude's a future Friday guy. I mean, his first inning of his start last weekend in Hoover is 97 out of his hand. I mean, he's going to be a real guy for them. And the bullpen has really solidified. Like, it might be the best bullpen in the country in terms of depth. Now, they don't have a guy who, can really come in and totally close it down. But they have 6 or 8 guys who have been pretty doggone good this year. So I like where they're at. The one tricky part about that regional is that I think ETSU is kind of a tough 3 because, again, it's a team that hits with a ton of power. And if it's hot and the ball is flying, I think that could be a tricky matchup. But otherwise, I like their chances there.
Alabama is a 2 seed in Hattiesburg. How do you feel about their opportunity to go there and beat a Southern Miss team that was as hot as anybody in college baseball over the last 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, the question about that one is, is Southern Miss going to trust their 2-starter to beat Columbia, which Columbia always tends to be a tricky team in a regional, whether they're a 3 or a 4. So there's that. But if Southern Miss is able to beat Columbia and advance to Saturday in the winners bracket game and have J.B. Middleton ready to go, it's hard to imagine anybody else winning that regional just because they do pitch it on a very high level. They have SEC quality arms, and I just don't think, whether it's Alabama or Miami, I don't think either of those 2 teams has enough pitching to really make Southern Miss pay for it later in the weekend. Now, if Southern Miss does feel compelled to use J.B. Middleton against Columbia, then I think Alabama's right there. It's going to take getting a little more on the mound. Riley Quick has been pretty good, but Zane Adams has not been as of late. But they're just going to need more to get through this. Because, oh, by the way, this is not your older brother Southern Miss. Like, this team can actually swing it, and they've got some power in the middle of the order. This is not like the Southern Miss teams we've seen before, which is like, they're trying to win games 4-3. This is definitely not that.
The one pitching decision I have seen, and I haven't looked nearly as closely as you have, but Oklahoma is not going to throw Kyson Witherspoon tomorrow. They're going to play Nebraska with his brother Malachi and hope that they can get through that and face North Carolina with Kyson Witherspoon. Do you like that decision? And then, obviously, how do you like Oklahoma's chances?
Yeah, I do like that decision because if you're Oklahoma, like, there are teams where this doesn't apply. It's a big deal for some teams to get into a regional and win a couple games, and especially if you've not been in a regional for a while. Like, I think about Kansas and Fayetteville. Like, yes, they want to win that regional, but Kansas hasn't been in a bunch of regionals. Like, it's a big deal if they get to Sunday and kind of keep momentum going. But if you're Oklahoma, like, you're there to win that regional. Like, going 2-2 and losing in the regional final of North Carolina doesn't really earn you anything if you're Oklahoma. So, I say do whatever it takes to put yourself in the best position to win the regional, and that's beating Nebraska with somebody other than Kyson, in this case Malachi, and then win that game and take on UNC with Kyson. And even if UNC throws Jake Knapp, the ACC Pitcher of the Year, like, I think if you're Oklahoma, you like that matchup. Like, you're going to take that 10 out of 10 times. So if they can pull that off cleanly, I think they're in this.
All right, let's go to go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, if not, it gets a lot trickier for them.
No doubt about that. All right, let's go to LSU's pod and start with Clemson, where LSU is paired. They've got USC Upstate, which I believe is their first regional, and then Kentucky and West Virginia. How do you like the matchup for Kentucky? And then this has obviously got an LSU flavor to it because potentially LSU could play one of those 4 teams next weekend. Yeah,
I think it's a tough one for Kentucky just because I think West Virginia and Clemson are similar in terms of offenses that aren't necessarily the sexiest lineups out there, but they will grind you down. And I can just see it now where those 2 teams get whoever plays them whenever gets into Kentucky's bullpen, and it's just Kentucky's not going to be good enough to overcome that. I kind of can see that in the cards. But either Clemson or West Virginia would be a tough customer for LSU. Certainly more so Clemson, especially because going to the box, this Clemson team is one that, yes, they play better at home like most teams do, but they're not going to be freaked out by the box. As a matter of fact, like, a lot of those guys, including Cam Cannarella, kind of seem to thrive in hostile environments. So I think they're going to be up for that series, and they'll be competitive in it. It's still like LSU at home, but Clemson obviously could be a really tricky matchup for them.
The general consensus is that LSU got a soft draw here with Little Rock, Rhode Island, and DBU. Is that how you feel, and how do you handicap LSU's chances?
Yeah, I think it's probably the softest. And I thought the committee did a good job. It's soft, but it's not egregious. I think part of what makes it soft is that, you've obviously got a Little Rock team that's a soft 4 that got hot in their conference tournament, and Rhode Island, which is a 3 just largely because their RPI is in the top 70, and it appears maybe the biggest reason for that is they beat Oregon once early in the season. So that's a 4 that got seeded as a 3, and that happens sometimes. So, and then DBU is a good team, not taking anything away from them, that, but they just don't see SEC level competition week in and week out, and I just wonder how their depth is going to hold up. So, I like LSU to go 3-0 here and get through it, and obviously that's what you're looking for.
If Jay Johnson calls you this evening, I'm not sure that's going to happen, but if he does and asks you who he should pitch tomorrow against Little Rock, what would be your answer?
Not Kate Anderson or Anthony Ianson. Take your pick of anybody else.
Okay.
I just don't think Little Rock has anything that can hurt you offensively. I'd be really shocked by that, and I think you're going to score plenty of runs. They've got a good Friday guy, Jackson Wells, but I think you're going to score runs. I don't think this is going to be an issue. That being said, Jay's a little like Tony. I go back to that 23 regional against Tulane. Paul Skeens on the mound against a Tulane team that won like 14 games. So something tells me we're going to see one of the big names tomorrow. But if it were up to me, that would not be the case.
Enjoy the baseball, Joe. I hope we're previewing a Baton Rouge Super Regional next week. We'll catch up either way.
All right, see you later.
Joe Healy, SEC Extra, part of the D1 baseball family. Great time to get involved with D1 baseball. Check out the Highway to Hoover podcast and see all the preview content. They've got a lot up there, D1 baseball, right now. Come back and wrap up the hour. Let's see. I'm going to hold that. There was an interesting fashion choice at the box today. Talk about that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. Jonathan Carbo and his team, phenomenal folks to work with. They're technical experts when it comes to insurance. And not everybody that's in the insurance field is that way. A lot of people are just salesmen. A lot of people are just relationship havers. But if you're looking for technical expertise from your broker, call the Highland Insurance Group. They can do things with your property and casualty that not every brokerage can do. They're an independent agent. That means they got dozens of contracts with different markets. They can place your insurance properly, whether it's EPL insurance, cyber insurance, crime, property, umbrella. It can be tricky in this market. It's expensive. It's difficult. There's not a lot of competition down here in South Louisiana, but you can find competition with an independent broker like the Highland Insurance Group. If you're a business owner, if you're a risk manager, if you're a CFO, if you're handling insurance, the Highland Insurance Group needs to be a call on your list months before renewal time. We know storm season's here. Contact the Highland Insurance Group at HighlandIG.com, HighlandIG.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
So we're a little short on time here to end the hour, and that's intentional. We had 13 teams we wanted to talk about in the NCAA tournament, and I felt like that was important to get to with Joe, who does such a great job of covering the league. And then there's one topic I'd like to briefly touch on that is not going to take very long, so we can shoehorn it here to the back end of the hour, and then we'll push off the dock in the second hour. We'll get to Chris Blair in 20 minutes. There are some photos surfacing on the interwebs of LSU practicing in gold baseball hats. And this crossed my radar earlier this week. I just don't like them. And I don't know what uniform you would wear the golds with. I'm trying to think, like, you're not going to wear the gold hats with the gold jerseys, are you? Like a double gold? And then, like, are you going to wear them with the purple jerseys? That's kind of harsh. And then you've got the white with the purple accents. I think the gold would kind of clash with the white a little bit. It's not like football. I don't hate someone going to the game in the gold hat. I just don't think it looks good on the players. Now, that's a shocker to everyone who watches me talk about uniforms during football season and cry like a baby on here. But Jay Johnson said something on the record in a press conference that it was burned into my brain. He said, it's important to me that LSU looks like LSU when we take the field. So I don't expect you're going to see LSU come out in colored pants like Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, the dark, deep grays like Missouri and Tennessee wear. There's some bad stuff out there in the Southeastern Conference, and I don't think you're going to see that from LSU. The other hats that I saw this week that LSU's practicing in were the camo ones. I know that people say, well, that's in support of the troops, and that's awesome. And they do the soldier salute every game. I think that's a pretty good nod to the troops. They actually honor actual troops, which is great. They don't have to wear a digital camo hat to necessarily do that on a baseball field like Ole Miss does. So my hope is that they don't wear them. If they wear them and score 15 runs off a left-handed pitcher, I'll live, I promise. But my preference is that LSU looks like LSU out on the baseball field, and LSU doesn't wear gold caps. The purple ones look great. They look great with the pins. They look great with the whites. They look great with the golds. They look great with the grays. And so my hope is that they just look like LSU does on the field. Look, I know that kids do kid stuff. I don't necessarily think that Jared Jones and Stephen Milam and Tommy White look great out there with pink arm sleeves and a purple jersey. I don't think that's a super great look. They think it looks great. They score 50 runs. Great. Hope they go win a national championship wearing pink sleeves. Couldn't care less. Tommy White hit a walk-off homer in a pink sleeve. But just my 2 cents. Maybe just stick with the purple hats and hit the ball a little bit better. That's my story. That's the end of hour number 1. We'll pause for Sports Center. Come back with more. It's on Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.